So today we're going to talk about creatine. How does it work and how much should you take? So let's first talk about how creatine works. Creatine is stored mainly inside of our muscles, but can also be stored inside of vital tissues like our brain. And creatine works to regenerate a molecule called ATP. The food that we eat, or the body fat that we utilize for energy, is all broken down to form ATP. You see, ATP is a molecule with 3 phosphates attached. And between the second and third phosphate, there is energy stored. And when we break the bond between that second and third phosphate, energy gets released. And this energy is used to power pretty much every single function in your body. The reason I'm talking to you is because I'm able to use ATP. This ATP is used for energy to allow our muscles to contract, as depicted in this video. And when ATP is used, it's turned into ADP, which pretty much just means it only has 2 phosphates. And the beautiful thing that creatine does is it binds to a phosphate and sits inside of our cell. And all it does is donate this phosphate to ADP, regenerating ATP. And this ATP can once again be used to fuel muscle contractions or pretty much every physiological function. And now the more of this creatine we have stored inside of our muscle and inside of our brain, the more of this ATP regeneration process can occur. With that being said, creatine also has another function that many people don't talk about. In essence, ATP is produced here in the mitochondria. But we need to get this ATP out of the mitochondria into the cytoplasm to actually be used for energy and muscle contractions. And it's been demonstrated in studies that creatine can actually enter into the mitochondria, bind to ATP, and bring it to the site where the ATP is actually going to be utilized. Additionally, being that it's in such close proximity to this ATP, when ATP gets broken down to fuel some sort of physiological function, this creatine with the phosphate attached is right next to it to be able to regenerate ATP extremely quickly. And this is an extra nuance that I just find fascinating. In essence, creatine doesn't magically increase muscle mass. However, creatine can draw water inside of the muscle cell, allowing it to appear larger. And the additional energy it supplies can improve exercise performance. And this increased stress on the musculature can increase exercise adaptations. Additionally, it can actually improve exercise recovery and provide more energy during the exercise recovery process, which is important for repairing damage from exercise. And the amount of ATP in the cell is one factor that can increase or decrease the amount of protein synthesis in response to a workout. However, understand that the differences in magnitude are very, very small. With that being said, there are other benefits. It appears to lower the incidence of injuries, likely because it increases water retention in the muscle. And it's likely because it provides more support and energy to the muscle cells. And something that can cause muscular damage is a low ATP supply inside of a given muscle. And this increased water retention can actually act as a mechanism of hyperhydrating, or almost overhydrating prior to exercise, meaning we may need to ingest less fluid prior to exercise and our whole body hydration status will be improved. Therefore, there may be more flexibility if we do not have adequate electrolyte and water intake during extensive exercise. With that being said, what I find much more interesting is the fact that creatine is actually being used to help repair from cognitive damage and prevent cognitive decline. And some of the experts in the field of sports science have actually recommended that individuals who engage in contact sports like football, boxing, UFC, or MMA, or another sort of fighting sport, purposefully supplement with creatine and ensure that they are fully saturated with creatine, which I will get to in a moment, prior to and after any sort of event in which they may have one or more impacts to their head. It also appears that creatine can improve neurodegenerative conditions. And this is by the fact that creatine can supply the cells inside of our brain with more energy. And many of these conditions occur due to an insufficient supply of ATP inside of different areas of the brain. And for these studies, they actually give doses between 20 and 30 grams. Because in order for our blood levels of creatine to have any impact on the amount of creatine inside of our brain, it appears we need much larger doses than what we would need to saturate our muscle stores of creatine. And this is for a complex set of reasons, such as the fact that the brain should actually produce its own creatine. And we also have a barrier surrounding our brain that only allows certain molecules at a certain rate inside of the brain. Therefore, to make up for the fact that the brain doesn't actually utilize much of the supply of creatine in the bloodstream, we need to drastically increase the amount of creatine available into the bloodstream, increasing the rate and probability it will enter into the brain. And in a myriad of different reviews, there do not appear to be any detrimental effects of creatine supplementation, unless you have a pre-existing kidney disease in which creatine supplementation may simply put additional stress on the kidneys. With that being said, this has been a lot of talking about creatine, and this is only part 1. In part 2, I'll explain how much and how often you may want to take creatine, and what sources may be the best. So stick around for part 2, and if you're ready to take control of your health and energy, send me a DM to sign up for coaching.